And welcome once more to Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. With me, as always, Juan Zarate, our national security analyst. Juan, good to see you.
Bob, good to see you.
So let's talk about this Syria peace conference. What is this about? Because it seems like every side is going to the table with a different idea.
Well, this has been an attempt by the U.S. and Russia to bring the key parties to the table to see if there is a diplomatic path forward to ending the Syrian civil war. We're now 3+ years into the civil war with a massive humanitarian disaster, millions displaced, over 120,000 people killed, human rights atrocities on both sides, use of chemical weapons, sort of the worst of all cases that we've talked about. This is an attempt to see, is there a diplomatic path forward? And I think the reality is no one's expecting a grand result here. But people are hoping that by sitting down, having some of the rebels and the opposition there and the Syrian government, you can start to forge a path forward, maybe on some little things first, and then maybe on a transition.
I have to ask you, is this a serious effort, or are we just checking a box here? Because here's why I say that. The U.S. wants Assad to go. The Russians are there. They don't necessarily want Assad to go. And the opposition is there, and Assad can't stay if there's going to be a deal. I just don't see how all of that comes together.
No, you're absolutely right, Bob. And I think that's the fundamental question. Will Assad be part of this transition process, or is he going to stay in power? I mean, that's been the fundamental question, both in the context of the civil war itself and now the diplomacy, with the United States saying he has lost legitimacy. He cannot be part of this transition. He has to go. The Syrian foreign minister, Muallim, saying, of course, he's going to remain in power, and the Russians backing them, and the Iranians, who aren't at the peace talks, certainly supporting Assad and defending his regime.
And the Syrian government went as far as to try to spin this conference as about against the terrorists, as if like the U.S. was standing shoulder to shoulder.
Right. They use this as a forum to actually air their grievances. And so you saw the attacks against the rebels, right, and calling into question their motivations, who was supporting them. The Syrians actually attacked the Turks and the Saudis, saying you're supporting terrorists in our country, and really try to reframe this as an issue of Syria against foreign terrorists and interests versus the civil war that we know it to be. And you know, the trick here is, can you move the ball forward in any way? You're going to have the opposition and the regime meeting on Friday for the first time. That's significant. They may talk about prisoner swaps. They may talk about humanitarian corridors. If they could move the ball forward in some way, maybe the diplomacy is worth it.
I was going to say, what is the best thing we could hope for? I mean, if this collapses, it collapses, and we're where we started. Right. So there's not a lot to lose in that sense. But what's the best thing we could get out of this?
Well, I think the best thing you could imagine, even absent an agreement as to what happens to Assad, is perhaps agreeing to a process. And you've seen them talk about this, where you have parliamentary elections. You actually try to have elections in the Syrian context that starts to allow the rebels in. You allow some opposition, and so you start to create a political process that allows there to be political voice for the rebels or the opposition. That maybe translates into a transition of power in Damascus at some point down the road. That would be the hope. But for now, Bob, as you and I have talked about, this is an ongoing civil war. Assad is fighting to the finish with Russian and Iranian and Hezbollah support, and the rebels, who are fractured and who include Al-Qaeda types, are going to keep fighting.
For some reason, I'm not very optimistic, to be honest.
I'm not either, but it doesn't hurt to talk. We can't be Pollyannish about what will result.
Juan, good points as always. We'll keep an eye on it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bob.
And thanks to you for watching Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. We will see you again next time.